Welcome, everyone. I'm John Carson, Senior Vice President of Strategy and Growth at Blue Yonder. We are proud to present this thought leadership session on sustainability with Robin Lewis of the Robin Report, featuring Suzanne Long. Suzanne is the Chief Sustainability and Transformation Officer at Albertsons Companies, a role she took a year ago after 9 years in leadership roles at Albertsons in strategic sourcing, business improvement, and corporate initiatives. Suzanne also spent time with several leading consulting firms like Accenture early in her career as a leader in Lean Six Sigma. Suzanne has several times been named to the top women in grocery by Progressive Grocer. Quite an impressive background, I must say, Suzanne. It's no wonder Vivek has you leading this critical initiative for Albertsons Companies. We're so excited to have you here sharing with us today. Robin, I'll let you take it from here.
Yeah, wow, Suzanne, you're like you're like a rock star. Well, no, I'm serious. No,
That's my other career.
I'm really excited. Oh, that's your other career. Well, let me tell you something. I'm very impressed with what your background is, and I think you're going to lead your company into the future very well. Anyway, John, thanks for the introduction, and Suzanne, it is great to see you, and even better to be able to talk to you about some of the great initiatives that you're taking at Albertsons Companies. So first of all, thanks for giving us an hour of your time.
Well, I just thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be talking about this and sharing some of our story.
Well, I think the Albertsons Companies, under your new role there, really do take a leadership role in the area of sustainability, and especially by creating this executive position, which you now oversee, dedicated to these critical issues. To that point, can you give us a quick overview of your priorities and general strategies and your goals?
Sure. So the way to think about it for Albertsons Companies is that we've been in the sustainability space for many years. That's not necessarily new to us.
Okay.
But what is new to us is that we were doing many things in many different areas, and we didn't really have a sustainability or ESG, environmental social governance strategy. So if you asked anyone in the company, what are we doing in sustainability or ESG, they could list things. But if you asked, what are your big ambitions, or where are you playing a leadership role, I know we would have struggled to answer that. And so what happened 2 years ago is Vivek Shankaran, our CEO, asked me, and I was in a different role at the time, what is our ESG strategy? And I said, I don't know, but I will find out. And the answer was we didn't have one. And so, Vivek tasked me with figuring out what that should be. And so what we did is what's called a materiality assessment. So we basically said, all right, who are all of our stakeholders, right? Everything from our customers to our associates, our investors, our board of directors, outside raters and rankers and NGOs and activists. And we said, what do they think we should have as our top priorities? And we created a matrix of those and plotted them. And there's many things we have to care about as a grocery company that you want us to care about as a grocery company, right? So, there's actually 20 topics we came up with that aren't just, small, they're very important. So it's everything from think about food and product safety to customer health and wellness, diversity, equity, and inclusion, the climate, waste reduction and circularity. And there was a very exhaustive list. And so we went and asked all those stakeholders which ones they felt were most important. And then once we plotted those, we decided there were some things that we just have to be great at for you to want to be able to shop in our stores. So food safety is a perfect example of that. You're not going to want to shop in our stores unless we're great at food safety. So saying right. Food safety is our sustainability or ESG strategy wasn't the right fit, right? But then there were other areas where they really rose to the top, and it was very clear they needed to be focus areas for us. And they were places where we could have a big impact and where we could play a real leadership role in making sure that we're doing our part towards making sure it's a more sustainable planet. We have sustainable communities. We have a sustainable company. And so those four ended up being climate action, and that's really a focus on energy and emissions, waste reduction and circularity, and that is with a primary focus on food waste reduction and then plastics and packaging, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that is, of course, our own associates in making sure that our management reflects the diversity of our communities. But it also has to do with diversity of suppliers and diversity of customers. And then the last one is community stewardship. And that really has everything to do with hunger relief, just being in the grocery industry. So, and then we actually spent about a year establishing very clear goals in each one of those areas.
Well, this very brief list of what you guys are going to be doing, I'd like to take it's going to be very challenging because of your size. So let me just give for our audience a quick snapshot of how large you guys are. Over $70 billion in annual sales, 270,000 employees, nearly 2,300 stores located across 34 states. Obviously a very large enterprise with a lot of moving parts, right? And potential use of resources and generation of waste. So how do you address sustainability at this large scale?
Sure. That certainly is the question, right? And now that also means the bigger the opportunity, right? Which is sort of, the reason that we want to be a leader in this space. Well, as I mentioned, we identified, the first thing I think that's important is that we not try to be great at everything, right? We have to pick the things that we're really going to make our mark in. And that's why we picked those four areas I just mentioned: the climate action, waste reduction and circularity, diversity, equity and inclusion, and community stewardship. So by narrowing our focus, and listen, we have to care about all of it and do, we have to be good at all of it, but to be great, to be a real leader, we identified those four areas so we could really make sure we're targeting our efforts in the ones where we're going to have the greatest impact. And then those goals, setting very clear goals, was very important to us. So for example, in the area of climate action, we committed to reducing our emissions from our own operations. So that, what happens in the, call it, four walls of our stores, DCs, offices. For those who are kind of climate savvy, it's called Scope 1 and 2 emissions. We committed to reduce that by 47% between 2019 and 2030, and then become net zero in our own operations by 2040. We also have a science-based target initiative approved target by doing that. And then we will be getting 250 of our top suppliers to sign up for science-based targets because, we're a big box and we pass goods through it, right? And so we need to make sure that the goods that are produced upstream of us are doing their part to reduce climate impact, and that consumers downstream who purchase the products are being responsible in how they use them. So that's an example of the climate action. In waste reduction and circularity, we have committed to eliminating food waste going to landfill by the year 2030. And then we're taking an aggressive approach on our own brands products to reduce our plastics and packaging footprint, and then also make sure that more can go back into circularity, can be turned back into new products and packaging. In diversity, equity, and inclusion, we certainly have a goal to make sure our management reflects the communities that we serve and our employee base. And then we're working on goals around supplier diversity and customer diversity. And then lastly, in community stewardship, we've committed to enabling 1 billion meals by the year 2030, as well as working to break the cycle of hunger in communities we serve. So it's not enough just to feed someone a meal, because if you feed them breakfast, they need lunch. If you feed them lunch, they need dinner. So it's very important to also break that cycle. And we're a big enough player, we can bring parties to the table. So I think, in summary to your question, I think the way you get after this in our business is setting these very clear goals. Now we can really make sure that we're focused on the right things and that we're making progress towards achieving those.
Yeah, I mean, I'm amazed. I mean, what you've just gone through is really incredible and terrific. And it sounds like that old adage that don't let perfect be a barrier to better,
That's
right?
that
Which I
is.
think is it's a realistic way to look at it. So your work in the climate space obviously is not just about intentions and hope. Tell us about your latest ESG report. What are your goals and what have you accomplished so far?
Yeah, I think this is the part where I'm most proud of how the company is approaching this is, we're not just talking the talk, we're really walking the walk. And part of setting the
Yep.
ambitions was to make sure that we actually had roadmaps that would get us to where we were ultimately setting our goals. Doesn't mean we know all of the answers of what we're going to do a decade from now, right? That's one of the hard things about planning out this far. But it means that for the technologies and innovations that are available today that we can be harnessing, that we're taking advantage of those. And so, for example, in our latest ESG report, we, as I mentioned, we just recently set these goals, and with our baseline year of 2019, between 2019 and 2021, we reduced our carbon emissions inside our footprint by 19%,
Wow.
which is a pretty substantial drop. And
Yeah.
we said by 2030 we have to be at 47%. So we're already, a good chunk, about 40% of the way there. And the way we do that is that when we look at our internal carbon footprint, when we look at our own emissions, I think if you ask people, if you took a poll and you said, where do you think the majority of emissions come from in grocery? I think the majority of people would probably say, oh, it's the fuel that you use trucking groceries around the country from distribution centers. You hear about electric fleets and things like that. And certainly that is part of our footprint. But Robin, it's only 3% of our footprint.
Wow.
86% of our footprint is made up of two things split equally. One is the amount of energy that we use, and the second is all about refrigerants and refrigeration. So
Yeah.
if you think about, walk it like in your mind's eye, walk into a grocery store, right?
Right.
There's refrigeration everywhere. I mean, it's in the deli, it's in the bakery, it's in the frozen aisle, it's in the dairy aisle, it's in the meat department, it's where you buy your beer and your wine, it's, in the coolers at the front. There's refrigeration everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Well, refrigerants are bad for the environment. They are intended to be a closed loop system, but you get leaks in it, just like any leak can happen in, any, in a pipe or, any system in your house. Those leaks can happen. And when you leak refrigerants, that's bad for the environment. Now, so refrigerants are one part of the equation. And then the other part is energy. So in that same mind's eye, right, not only is all that refrigeration using energy, but we're keeping the lights on and the registers running and the freezer, and the ovens cooking. And all of that requires energy. So we are a huge consumer of energy. And so the best way that we realized to be able to reduce our carbon footprint was to address that 86%, to drop the amount of energy we're using, change the type of energy we're using where possible to be more renewable. And then in refrigeration, changing the type of refrigerants we use and reducing the amount that's leaking through the systems. So that's how we've been very aggressive, put doors on cases, for example, right? Now you have to open a door to grab your milk out of the refrigerator. Just putting those doors on has a really significant impact to our energy footprint. And so we've been able to change out LED lights and put doors on cases and do any number of projects. And that has materially changed our energy and our carbon footprint.
Boy, talk about taking things for granted. As the average person, you're right. I walk through a supermarket, don't even give a wink about what's going on there. But boy, are you correct? I mean, when you think about it, it's astounding. So, and also in the area of packaging and waste, which are, I guess, two big challenges for all grocery stores. What are your operating practices there to deal with that headache?
Yeah, the biggest thing we can do always first is try and change the behaviors or the processes of how we're operating to just be more efficient, right? So we always want to make sure we have what our customers want. And we want to minimize the amount of waste when we can't exactly predict that, right? So, we roast chickens, right? And we want to make sure that it's hot and ready for you when you come in at 5:30 and need to feed your family dinner.
Mm.
But we also, we don't want to overproduce and have a bunch of extra chicken, but we don't want to underproduce and not have you have the opportunity to, use that for your family for dinner. So it's a very tricky balance, always trying to, we have over 34 million customers per week go in our stores. So
Wow.
I don't even know what I'm going to have for dinner tonight. So times 34 million people, walking in the stores and making, immediate decisions about what they are going to want to shop for. It's very hard to predict that behavior. And so we do our best, and we're employing a lot of technologies and processes to try and get that ordering practice and that the production practice as close to aligned with what our consumers are buying as possible. So we're trying to eliminate waste before it even happens, right?
Yeah.
But then once that waste happens, there's ways that we can handle that waste in ways that's much more productive for the environment. So for example, the first thing we want to do is we want to sell as much as we can in our grocery stores, right? And if we can't sell it at full price and we discount it, we want to then sell it at that discount. But then there's still the product that's left over. And much of that, for example, is edible food, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what we don't want is that edible food going to landfill.
Yeah.
We want that edible food that can no longer be sold to customers or that, doesn't meet a certain standard in our stores, to make sure it gets into the mouths of those who need it. And that has been one of our big pushes. And to be honest, we haven't been where we needed to be in that space, but we're changing that. And so, for example, we have just completely redefined our food donation program enterprise-wide, and it's in the process of being rolled out to greatly expand the number and types of items that can be donated. And so that is one of the things I'm most proud of, and making sure that the food is safe, that we're doing everything we can to protect, people and their health, but also making sure that that meal can get to somebody who needs it and deserves it. So that's, pardon me, one of our biggest pushes. The other push is making sure that as we use plastics and packaging in our business, the number of bags that we use when we're putting, products in it when at checkout, or, the types of plastic containers we're using in our delis, we're trying to make those as efficient and as recyclable as possible. That's going to be a journey. But those are just some of the ways that we're trying to reduce the amount of waste in our business.
Yeah. This thing about food waste and, wanting to get the food that, you can't sell to people who really need it. I was watching TV the other day, and there are parts of the third world who are, these little children are starving to death.
Great.
And I've always said that the 21st century should be the distribution century. And that's not just distribution, in the United States and how we distribute things and get them, but it is how to distribute to the whole world. And so, I think what you're doing, and you probably find areas in the vicinity of your stores where you can find people and organizations that do need that food. And I think that's great. Anyway, but then that's a whole other subject. But I think it's, we've got more than we need to eat and keep ourselves going.
Well,
in
it's
parts of the world. Yeah. You want to say?
no, you're exactly right. Well, it's 1 in 8 Americans is food insecure, and oftentimes it's it's not obvious to us that someone is food insecure.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I really appreciate about working for Albertsons is we're sort of the biggest company no one's ever heard of, because we're considered the local grocery store. My local Vons, my local Albertsons, my local Jewel, my local Shaw's. And so I think people think of us in that way, and I love that. And we provide a lot of autonomy to our divisions, our operating divisions, to make sure that that stays in place. And one of the great opportunities in this food donation program is we don't just have to say there's only one place that our food is going to go, right, to be able to distribute it. It can go to large organizations, like we have a very strategic partnership with Feeding America. But there are places where Feeding America doesn't have facilities or isn't able to take all of the food types that we're willing to donate. But your local soup kitchen might, your local church group, your, a homeless shelter nearby. And because we are embedded in our communities, we have an opportunity to get more of that food into the mouths of those who need it, and create that distribution through those local relationships. So it's really a pretty powerful story.
That's great. That's great. And I'm curious also, Suzanne, what influence you have with your manufacturing partners. Can Albertsons companies leverage its own sustainable practices, to help improve the industry overall? Or, you guys are big enough, you could probably tell, Procter & Gamble to reduce their package sizes. I don't know. What do you do there?
Yeah, it's well, the first thing I would say is, we certainly are a very large player. And the nice thing is that we're not the only large player that has big ambitions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Kroger, Walmart, Ahold Delhaize, we all have similar ambitions to try to reduce our footprint. And CPG companies are feeling that from consumers as well. Millennials and Gen Z care a great deal about the planet and making sure that companies are employing sustainable practices. So they see consumer behavior shifting that way, and they see their big customers, which is us, right, shifting that way as well. And so the nice thing is there's been really a collective push in that direction. It's not just us fighting the good fight. It's a much broader it's a much broader push from the entire industry. I think the challenge that the whole industry, both retailers and CPG companies face is, it's one thing to commit, it's another thing to do.
Very good. Very good.
And I think we really need to make sure that when we're making these commitments that we are, and this, I feel very confident that this is the approach that we've taken, that we actually know what it is we're going to do to reduce our impact, right? To really achieve those goals. And so CPG companies, I can tell you, are leaning in hard. I mean, I've probably had 20 conversations with CPG companies just in the last 60 days about how we can strategically partner on everything from plastics and packaging reduction to hunger relief. So there's so much opportunity, diversity, equity, and inclusion. There's so much out there we can be partnering on. And so the nice thing is that everyone's sort of in the boat. We just need to make sure everybody's rowing.
Yeah. So they're leaning in with you, and they're getting it. And it's amazing how this thing is moving forward. And I'm very impressed with what you guys are doing. So, to kind of pull all of these threads together, your company obviously has clearly demonstrated making sustainability a business strategy, not a just feel-good marketing positioning or greenwashing, as people are calling it. So, like you say, you got to do it. And so, from the business side, what are the tangible financial benefits tied to sustainability? And can you bring us up to date on how sustainability can improve the bottom line and why it should?
Sure. Even in my own personal background, I don't come from a background in sustainability. My background is really in process improvement and Lean Six Sigma and transformational change and mergers and acquisitions, right? And all of those are about finding business efficiency, finding waste and reducing it. Sustainability is no different, right? When we reduce the amount of energy that we're using in our stores, it reduces our carbon footprint and lowers our energy expense. When we keep food waste from going to landfill, we not only get the tax benefit of food donations, but we actually reduce our waste hauling costs. And by the way, methane, which is what food waste gives off, is one of the worst types of gases for the climate. Making sure that doesn't hit landfill, it goes to people or gets recirculated back into animal feed or other things. so all of the ambitions that we have, diverse companies perform better, right? And so all of these ambitions that we have around ESG and sustainability are certainly around doing the right thing and playing our role to make sure that we're supporting our communities and the planet. But it's also just great business. I mean, great sustainability strategy is great business strategy, and great business strategy is great sustainability strategy. It's almost it's unreal to me sometimes how people make them sound like they're actually in conflict with one another. There's places where more innovation is going to have to happen for those dollars and cents to make, to play out. But there's no doubt there is plenty of fruit hanging from the trees for us to reduce our expense and do the right thing at the same time.
Yeah. So there is a financial benefit.
Yes.
So kind of winding up, let's talk a bit about the communities you serve. How does Albertsons Companies invest back into the community, and why is that important? And also help us understand more about the impact you guys are making, and is there a play for sustainability in these community initiatives that you have going? And can you help, change attitudes and behavior?
Yeah, we engage so much with our communities. It's really incredible the stories and actions that our stores especially take. Like I said, we are really seen as the local grocer, and it's really amazing how we get to know the people who walk in and shop in our stores. So there's a lot of activity we do day in, day out in our local neighborhoods. But the biggest role, that we can play, I'll call it company-wide, is this hunger relief, this food donation effort that we're heading down. It's just at such a scale because of the business that we're in. So, for example, last year, and so this would be before our sort of enhanced food donation program, but in 2021, we donated 78 million pounds of food, right?
Wow.
And so when you think about, and that wasn't even at full scale with all of the, categories and, types of food and all of the stores necessarily in, our footprint doing that sort of in equal measure. So, there's such a huge opportunity to be increasing that. So, I really feel good about us being able to hit that billion meals mark that we've set, because I think with these new donation practices, we'll be able to do that. Even, hopefully at a faster pace than even originally anticipated. But then the other thing is we're just involved in our normal communities. When there's a fundraiser that needs to happen, when you need helping hands with a community project, our stores get involved. And so I think there's this beautiful package of sort of what is the scale that we can create and the impact we can have in terms of food donation. But then I think there's this local beauty of, it's going to a local shelter that might not otherwise get much food donation, or somebody helping out a local school organization because they know that that's an important part of their community. It's a very important, piece of the fabric of our company.
Dare I ask, what is the number, the industry number, not just Albertsons Companies, of food that how many pounds of food go to waste and not through to donations?
Yeah,
is there a number?
The estimate that the industry what the industry estimates is that 40% of the food produced in the U.S. ends up going to waste of some sort or another. And so that number is astronomical.
I know.
It's and so even if we can, do a small part towards chipping away at that, that it will have a huge impact. And to your point, we would love to be perfect. We would love to be perfect in many places, but even to be good or better than we are today would have a meaningful impact. And I think that's sort of when you're a grocer, that's the way you have to think about it.
Well, as I said, don't let perfect get in the way of getting better. And a bigger industry in my wheelhouse is apparel, of course, and I think apparel is even worse. The amount of apparel that is destroyed or put into landfills a year, I think, is even worse in the grocery area. I mean, we've been overstuffed in apparel for probably half a century. Too many stores, too much stuff, blah blah blah. I mean, you know the story. So finally, what do you see as the biggest challenges for grocery retail over the next 5 years to become more sustainable? And connected to that, what advice would you, Suzanne, give to the next gens who want to get into this work?
Sure. So first, in terms of the challenges over the next 5 years, there's really very few places in business. In fact, I can't think of any, to be honest, where you say, set a goal that's 10 or 20 years out and tell me exactly how you're going to get there. It's just, it's an incredible ask, right? No one would even try to do that in their personal life, much less, for a $70 billion company. But that is what the world of ESG demands of us, right? And so to me, the challenges are not the next 3 to 5 years, because we have line of sight. We know the technologies and capabilities that exist today that we can be executing over the next 3 to 5 years. But as we start to get into the 5-year mark, one thing is there just needs to be more innovation in energy efficiency, in renewable energy, and in handling of refrigeration. We are not the only, any grocery company is struggling with the same things we are. And actually, Europe has been very instructive in some of the things that they've done around energy reduction and refrigeration. And I think, the US can learn a lot from that. And then, I'm hoping that with some of the new investment that's happening in renewable energy and just, sort of better for the planet solutions, that we'll have more coming our way that we can test. And that's one of the things we've actually been very aggressive in, is not just saying, okay, let's do the path we know is right in front of us, but actually working with, academic institutions, innovative labs to say, what are going to be the next set of things? So we can be looking at those now. And that way in 5 years, they're ready to roll. We're not looking at them for the first time. So I think energy efficiency and refrigeration technology is something that really has to come a long way. And then the second thing, Robin, is diversity, equity, and inclusion is really a tough thing to solve for. It's been an issue that's been systemic to our culture for so long. Trying to unwind that and do it right is really hard. It's a long journey. It takes a lot of forethought. Somebody can snap their fingers tomorrow and change the makeup of an organization just by who they hire or, who leave, right? I mean, you can change those numbers, but that's not the intention. That's not how you create a culture, right? You have to be thinking about creating opportunity for people over literally decades. And so I think that the challenge for our organization, and we are not the only ones, I would actually say I'm going to call it all organizations, not even
absolutely.
Is that we have to start creating systemic change in a way that diversity, equity, and inclusion doesn't even need to be an area where we have to seek it out. It becomes part of the fabric of how we operate. And that's true for our management teams, the customers who shop in our stores, right? Making sure we're giving diverse suppliers a chance to get their product on shelf. And I don't think, anyone's really cracked that nut, but boy, we're working to try.
Well, you're doing a great job. And the thing about diversity, inclusion and so forth. One of the last century businesses that I used to work for, should go name. I mean, we would get a dictate from down, from on top to, well, you've got to hire, 5% more,
females or people of color.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, and that is no way to really correct this issue. But what you've said is it's got to become a cultural thing, which becomes a natural. Everybody is equal and everybody can be included.
And it has to be, there's certainly tactics that can be used, and making sure you have diverse representation in the candidates pool that you're looking at, that you're expanding where you're looking for talent and the type of talent you're looking for. All of those things are tactics that you can do. But
Yeah.
to change the fabric, the underlying, will females and people of color feel a part of the culture and feel that they are contributing to the culture is a huge part of DE&I, right? It's not a statistics question. I mean, statistics are part of it, but it's really making sure that it is how you operate. And that's going to take a lot longer than I think people sometimes assume.
Yeah, having listened to you and all of these areas, I would love to have your job because
I do have a cool job, don't I?
Yeah, I think you do, because you are on the leading edge of some of the biggest challenges and issues that we must resolve and change over the next several years. And so everything you do is really meaningful. Anyway, you and the Albertsons companies are sure walking the walk, and not just talking about it. As you know, so many companies do a lot of greenwashing and blah, 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 but they aren't doing it. And importantly, you've made the points that sustainability is actually good for business in terms of reducing costs and in a whole lot of other areas as well, while also helping the planet. So thanks, Suzanne, so much. And now, John, I think, has a couple other questions. John, you want to come in?
Yep. Thanks, Robin. No,
Okay.
two things really struck me there, Suzanne, when you were talking. So I've read your ESG report, and it just doesn't read the same as you describe it. So thank you for your time today.
Oh, yeah.
You really get a feel of the passion and energy and dedication that Albertsons has to this initiative, right? So I love the things you described about what you're doing in your four walls of your stores, your offices, and your DCs, right? Around energy consumption and refrigerants, and your influence over your CPG partners, right? I think that's very important. But the thing that struck me the most was the 40% food waste estimate that you gave. And so I feel like some of that's on me as a consumer, right? So what I would love to hear from you is, when I walk in my local Market Street in Frisco, Texas, how do I shop differently that I can help us as stewards of this earth reduce that 40% number? Like, is there something I should be doing as a consumer to help? Now, I know you don't want me to buy less, right? But how can I
No,
buy smarter? How can I buy smarter? Or, we recycle at home and we try to reuse and we save, and, but what can I do as a consumer in your store to help with this initiative?
Yeah, it's, first, thank you for the question, because there is that downstream consumption, what people buy and how they use the products that they buy is a big part of this. And, different people value different things, right? So in some cases, people don't want to see food go to waste, right? And so, the way you can shop, and I'll give you a couple of suggestions, how that can, but other people, about how you can help address that. But, there's other people who may say, yes, I care about food waste, but I actually really care about how this particular product is sourced. Maybe it's a certain type of fish, right? Or does this product contain X ingredient that I know is not good for the environment? And so, I think one of the things we want to do is make sure we provide our consumers with choice, that they can choose not only the products that they want, but they can make sure that they can make choice of their value system when they walk into our stores, right? And that can be something as simple as, are you someone who wants to buy organic or not? And that's a very personal decision. But I would say, in terms of what you can do, first of all, I would say be intentional about what you buy. Think about, your ability to consume it in the time frame that it can actually be consumed. That's one thing. But the biggest thing for me personally is that there is quite a myth among consumers around what does a Best Buy, Sell Buy, best if consumed by, freshest by dates that we see on all of these products that we have, right? I mean, if you look at a water bottle, I am not joking. If you look at a water bottle, it has a date on a water bottle. Now, I am sure that there is a science to the plastic, and I'm confident about that. But I will tell you that those dates are not based on, in aggregate, are not based on science in many cases. They are based on what those companies feel is going to, maybe make their product taste best. I have a yogurt in my fridge, I'm embarrassed to admit this, that has been there since summer. It's like a large container. I use it for smoothies. That yogurt is still perfectly good. It has a July 27th date on it. So the biggest thing you can do as a consumer is actually think about, is it that this product is no longer consumable? Because it's not a food safety issue in that case, right? It's all about, does it still taste right to me? Does it still smell right to me? And there's a lot of great information out there about how inconsistent that food labeling is in terms of how long food is good for. But as Americans, we think, oh, it's past that date, let's toss it in the trash. That's the biggest thing.
Guilty as charged, right? Yes, so no, I appreciate
no one's
that.
going to want to come have a smoothie at my house, but I promise they're still delicious.
No, I hear about all the great work you guys are doing, and I think we should do our part as well. Once that food gets home. So thank you for that. Last question for you, Suzanne. So I loved your discussion around diversity and inclusion, and we're doing that at Blue Yonder as well. And I love your comments around candidates. That's one thing I do as a leader, is I try to ask for a more diverse pool of candidates. And so I'm passionate about creating that diverse pool of candidates. And so we do a lot of work with top universities and their supply chain programs, because that's our business, right? And I want to help create the next generation of diverse leaders, right? So we've got a large group of folks that will be consuming this recording here that are about to exit college and begin their careers, many of them in retail, right? And so we hope we're creating this next generation of leaders, right? So you've had a very successful career and ended up in the C-suite in a $70 billion retailer. So we would check that off as Suzanne has a very successful career, but you started, in consulting, with some of the big firms. So you've built on your work experiences to get to where you have this awesome job. I agree, Robin. She's got an awesome job, a fun job. Any advice for those watching us today about, how to start, how to build on your experiences and what good looks like, and maybe share a story of where you stumbled along the way and had to overcome it. Any advice for these folks watching?
You bet. So the first thing I would say is, all throughout my career, I've had this series of jobs. I think that I was either too foolish or too, ambitious to turn down. And so, I mean, roles where no one in the companies that I worked for had ever had those jobs before. Right. And so, I was, for example, I worked for Albertsons before it was its current Albertsons. That's a story in and of itself, a fascinating case study of sort of how the company has morphed over time. When I first joined Albertsons, I was running sort of a process design part of IT. And one day the CEO came to me and said, how would you feel about building out a Lean Six Sigma capability? It hasn't been done in food and drug before. And, and I said, why not? I knew nothing about Lean or Six Sigma or, what he was asking me to do, but it was sort of, why not? It's an opportunity, right? And so then, fast forward and, I'm working now for the new Albertsons, companies, and I get asked to lead, integrations that grew us from 200 stores and $3 billion in sales to 2,300 stores and $60 billion in sales in a 3-year period. And we acquired 1,000 stores from SuperValu. We acquired United, A&P, and most significantly Safeway during that time. And I was asked to lead all those integrations. I knew nothing about what it was to lead an integration, but what did I say? Why not? you know. And then when I got the, opportunity to lead sustainability, which was not a space that I was necessarily comfortable in or had a background in, but it had so much to do with efficiency, I said, why not? And so the biggest piece of advice I can give to people is make sure in your career that you're giving yourself the opportunity to say, why not? Now, I will also add this piece of advice. There are times where you should stop and say, why not? Like, why should I
Right.
not do this? So I'm not saying go into it blindly, but I think keeping yourself open and not being afraid of something just because you haven't done it before or you're not completely familiar, lean into it. Be a fast learner. Be curious. And I really think I get the chance to ask, I call them kindergartner questions because these are new spaces for me. And so sometimes asking those simplest questions end up being the most enlightening.
Right.
So why not is one thing. And the second thing I would say is get your hands dirty. You don't know what sustainability looks like for a grocery company sitting from a white walled office.
Right.
You know it when you get into the back room of a store and you're, shoulder deep in a bin of organic waste, figuring out what could have been donated versus, what needs to go to an organic recycler. And you gotta wear your dirty clothes and dumpster dive and ask people what's really going on in the business. And I think it's that combination, the why not and get your hands dirty, that creates the most opportunity in one's
Yep.
career.
I mean, great advice, Suzanne. And
Unbelievable.
Robin, I think what we need to add to that impressive intro I gave at the beginning of this was I wrote down fearless pioneer. That's Suzanne.
Yeah.
Right? So,
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So
For
no,
sure.
right. No, very, very good advice. And I hope those that are watching this can take that to heart. And I completely agree with everything you said. So Robin, any follow-up questions from you before we wrap up?
Why not? I think that could have been the core of the whole story.
I agree.
Yeah.
Agree.
Yeah.
No, Suzanne, we so much appreciate you joining us today. What a tremendous story and initiative and results so far that you guys are driving at Albertsons Company. So appreciative of your time today to jump on with Robin and I. And Robin, thank you so much.
Well, John, thank you.
Yeah. So we appreciate you guys, and I hope everyone can consume this. And it's easy to find their ESG report online if you want to read it and get the details. So we appreciate all you're doing out there, and we're
And
going to
much more to come.
and
I'm
much
an
more
evil
to come.
scientist
Yeah,
at heart.
yeah.
So.
And we'll do our part as consumers to help with this. So I think
We
together
appreciate
we can impact the world. Yeah.
This has been so fun. Thank you so
Good.
much for having me.
Yep. You bet. Thanks for your time, Suzanne.
Thank you both.